The exhilaration of the performance was swiftly overshadowed by a digital storm. As Ethan's video spread like wildfire across the school's social media channels, a malicious montage emerged. Twisted clips carefully edited by Jason Miller, designed to undermine every ounce of respect Ethan had just earned. The cruel caption read like a dagger: "Why does diva Monica Carter hide her son? Rejected by every label for lack of originality. Hash fake talent, charity project." Notifications exploded on Ethan's phone, a relentless tide of hateful comments, shares, and toxic whispers flooding his screen. The sting of public humiliation cut deeper than any whispered insult in the hallways. Yet, amid the chaos, help came from an unexpected source. Liam Brooks, Ethan's quiet roommate from Chicago, stepped forward, revealing a hidden arsenal. "My dad's a defamation lawyer," Liam said without looking up from his laptop, "and I know a bit about digital tracking." Ethan's wariness met Liam's steady gaze, a lifeline in the storm. Meanwhile, Mrs. Collins, ever vigilant, had been quietly assembling her own evidence. As advisor to the student newspaper, she had access to years of student council meeting recordings, transcripts that unveiled Jason's true colors: manipulations, bullying, and orchestrated schemes to suppress scholarship students like Ethan. She laid the files before Ethan, eyes gleaming with determination. "This is pure gold," she said, the weight of truth heavy in the room. Despite the onslaught, Ethan refused to retreat. The digital battlefield was fierce, but with Liam's legal insight and Mrs. Collins' unwavering support, the tide was beginning to turn. Jason's smear campaign was unraveling thread by thread, revealing not the fallibility of Ethan, but the depths of Jason's deceit. In that moment, Ethan realized that the fight was no longer just about music or recognition. It was a battle for justice, dignity, and the right to be seen for who he truly was. Ethan Carter sat quietly in the sleek leather chair of David Reynolds' studio, the low hum of equipment surrounding him like a familiar embrace. The final mixes of his album, Invisible Roots, played softly through the speakers, each track a testament to his journey. Raw, honest, and unmistakably his own. David leaned over the mixing board, adjusting the equalizer with a knowing smile. "I always knew you had something special, Ethan," he said, his voice rich with pride. "But what happened at Westmore? It added a depth to your performance that wasn't there before." Ethan chuckled softly, a hint of wistfulness in his eyes. "Life experience," he replied simply. The weight of recent events, the sabotage, the public humiliation, the fight for truth, had shaped him in ways no rehearsal ever could. A buzz from his phone broke the moment. He glanced down to see a message from Monica, his mother, finally returning from her world tour. "Proud doesn't even begin to cover it," the text read. "I'll be there tomorrow. Love you." A warmth spread through Ethan's chest, a quiet affirmation of the bond they shared despite the distance and challenges. Monica had watched his performance countless times, each viewing revealing a new layer of her son's strength and artistry. "You turned their hatred into art," she confessed when they finally reunited. "That's what great artists do." As the days passed, the news of Ethan's impending album release stirred excitement beyond Westmore's walls. The once muted halls of the Academy now buzzed with whispers of anticipation and newfound respect. Invitations poured in, interviews lined up, and the narrative that once sought to diminish him was replaced with stories of triumph. Ethan, once just Monica Carter's son, was stepping boldly into his own spotlight, a rising artist ready to share his truth with the world. 3 years later, the halls of Westmore Academy had transformed, shedding the shadows of whispered mockery and cold glances. The once hostile corridors now buzzed with cautious respect, a quiet testament to the change Ethan Carter had ignited. The festival Roots, an annual celebration of diversity and talent named after the song that had marked his turning point, drew students from across the country, each eager to showcase their unique voices and stories. Ethan's return to the familiar stage was met with a wave of applause that was no longer tinged with skepticism, but filled with genuine admiration. As he stood beneath the spotlight, the same one that had once threatened to expose his vulnerabilities, he felt a profound sense of triumph and belonging. Before launching into his final song, Ethan shared a reflection that resonated deeply with everyone present. "There are moments in life when others try to define who we are, to place us in boxes that don't fit," he said, his voice steady and clear. "In those moments, we face a choice: accept their definition, or respond with our own truth. And that truth, when finally found, has a power that no prejudice can silence. His words hung in the air, a beacon of hope and resilience. The crowd listened, rapt and inspired, many moved to tears. Outside the auditorium, changes rippled through Westmore. A new principal, Vice Principal Garcia, committed to inclusivity, revamped policies tackling discrimination, and a student body more united than ever before. Former adversaries sought redemption, offering gestures of inclusion and respect. Even Connor Mitchell, once an ally to Jason Miller, now greeted Ethan with a nod of acknowledgement and newfound friendship. The journey from the boy burdened by a legacy and prejudice to the artist celebrated for his authentic voice was complete. Ethan's story wasn't just about overcoming adversity, it was about reclaiming identity and rewriting the narrative. As the final chords of his song faded into the evening air, Ethan Carter stood not just as Monica Carter's son, but as a symbol of courage, truth, and the unbreakable spirit that defines us all. Jason Miller's sharp, mocking laughter echoed through the grand auditorium of Westmore Academy, slicing through the tense silence like a blade. The spotlight glared down mercilessly, casting a harsh circle of light on the stage where Ethan Carter stood alone, every inch the target of ridicule. Rich kids from powerful families filled the rows, their pale faces twisted into cruel smiles and sneers, their whispered jokes swirling in the air like venom. Westmore was no ordinary school. It was a playground for privilege, where wealth bred arrogance and status was everything. Luxury cars lined the driveway, and gossip about extravagant parties drowned out the faint hum of anxious anticipation inside. Ethan, the scholarship kid from Oakland, felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. A black boy plucked from obscurity and thrust into a world that saw him as little more than a token. His mother, Monica Carter, a soul music icon, was out touring the globe, leaving him to navigate this battlefield alone. The microphone felt cold in his trembling hand, a stark reminder of the trap set for him. Jason and his clique had forged his signature to force him onto the talent show, turning what should have been a celebration of talent into a public spectacle of humiliation. Principal Stevens wore a fake smile, prodding him with empty encouragement. "The microphone is on, Mr. Carter. We're all eager to hear what you've prepared." The audience snickered, their expectation of failure palpable and suffocating. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest, every nerve screaming to flee, but he stood firm, swallowed the lump in his throat, and faced the crowd. Behind him, the faint glow of smartphones illuminated Jason's triumphant grin, ready to immortalize his downfall. This was supposed to be the moment Ethan was broken, but beneath the harsh spotlight, something quietly ignited within him, a spark that no cruelty could extinguish. Ethan Carter had spent the last 6 months walking a tightrope of invisibility at Westmore Academy, a place where every glance seemed to measure him not as a person, but as a symbol. The black scholarship kid, the diva's son, the charity project. He never talked about his mother, Monica Carter, a soul legend with 5 Grammy Awards, not because he was ashamed, but because he was exhausted. Every conversation, every sideways comment chipped away at his identity until all that remained was the weight of expectations he never asked for. When students clamored for selfies or concert tickets, they forgot she was black. But when it came time to mock or belittle, his skin color became the perfect target, disguised as harmless teasing. The hallways echoed with whispered jokes, the kind that cut deep under the guise of friendly banter. Ethan buried himself in his studies, desperate to prove his worth beyond the name he carried, yet it seemed invisible to those who mattered. He wasn't just fighting the burden of legacy. He was fighting a legacy of prejudice that tried to define him before he even had a chance to speak. In a world obsessed with labels and lineage, Ethan yearned for something simpler, to be seen for who he truly was. The harsh spotlight that blinded him on stage was nothing compared to the cold gaze of a community that refused to look beyond the surface. Every day was a battle against invisibility, a struggle to reclaim the narrative others had written for him. Yet beneath the exhaustion and the scars, a quiet defiance grew, one that no amount of mockery could erase. This was more than a fight for respect. It was a fight for his very soul. And deep down, Ethan knew he was ready to make them see, not the son of a superstar, but a force of his own making. When Principal Stevens' impatient fingers drummed on the podium and the murmurs of the restless crowd grew louder, Ethan felt the pressure tightening like a noose. Are you going to perform, Mr. Carter? Or will you disappoint us all by backing out? The sneer in her voice was thinly veiled, but Ethan's resolve hardened. He swallowed the lump in his throat and shook his head. I don't have anything prepared, he said quietly, his voice low but steady. The auditorium erupted in a chorus of snickers and whispered taunts, each one a jab aimed to break him. Yet, in the midst of the brewing storm, a calm voice rose from the front row. Mrs. Collins, the music teacher who had quietly watched Ethan's struggle from afar. Just a week before, she had found him alone in the dimly lit music room, softly humming to himself while poring over a history book. She hadn't interrupted, simply letting the moment be, until the sheet music slipped from her hands, alerting Ethan to her presence. Now, as the crowd waited expectantly, Mrs. Collins met Ethan's eyes with a look that said, "You don't have to do this." That silent encouragement sparked something in Ethan. The weight of humiliation was heavy, but so was the flicker of defiance burning inside him. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a fleeting second, and then spoke with a clarity that surprised even himself. Actually, I'm going to sing something my mom wrote. It's never been recorded or shared. A ripple of surprise swept through the audience. Whispers replaced laughter as curiosity took hold. Ethan adjusted the microphone, his gaze locking with Jason's mocking stare across the room. But this time, there was no fear, only quiet determination. The moment was his, not to fail, but to reclaim. Ethan's first note hung in the air, fragile and uncertain, before quickly finding its strength and soaring with soulful grace. The auditorium fell into a reverent silence as his voice unfolded, deep, rich, and unexpectedly powerful, weaving through the room like a tapestry of raw emotion and refined technique. The song, Invisible Roots, was a haunting ballad laced with the spirit of jazz and soul, telling a story of heritage buried beneath layers of concrete and doubt, but pulsing with unyielding life. Each lyric carried the weight of ancestors and the resilience of a history often overlooked, yet never forgotten. Faces that had moments before sneered were now captivated, their eyes reflecting a mix of awe and disbelief. Jason Miller, seated a few rows back, blinked in confusion. The script he'd so carefully written was unraveling in real time. This wasn't the embarrassing spectacle he'd planned, but something far more profound. Ethan's voice didn't just fill the space, it claimed it, turning the auditorium into a sanctuary where identity, pain, and hope collided in beautiful harmony. The crowd's whispers dissolved into silence as the song stripped away the masks, revealing a young man not defined by his mother's fame, nor by the prejudice that shadowed him, but by his own undeniable talent and spirit. Mrs. Collins, watching from the front row, felt tears sting her eyes, remembering the quiet moments in the music room where she had glimpsed this potential, a voice both disciplined and deeply authentic. The song was more than a performance. It was a declaration, a fierce insistence on being seen and heard. As Ethan's final note lingered, a hush settled over the room, pregnant with the realization that something extraordinary had just unfolded. A moment that would not soon be forgotten. Just as Ethan's voice began to soar, a sudden flicker of light sent a shiver through the auditorium. The pristine sound system betrayed him, crackling and spitting out a high-pitched feedback that pierced the air like shards of glass. Confusion rippled through the crowd as an unexpected, heavy electronic beat slammed through the speakers, loud, jarring, and utterly intrusive. Behind the scenes, Jason Miller and his cronies had invaded the technical booth, their malicious grins illuminated by the glow of tangled wires and flashing panels. The sabotage was blatant, an attempt to turn Ethan's moment of triumph into a public disaster. But instead of faltering, Ethan paused, his brow furrowing not in panic but in sharp focus. Years of watching his mother improvise during rehearsals, twisting the unexpected into magic, surged through him. Without missing a beat, he adjusted his vocal style, weaving his soulful melody into the harsh electronic rhythm. The intrusive noise no longer clashed with his song. It became part of it, a bold fusion of raw emotion and modern pulse. The audience's bewilderment shifted to astonishment as Ethan transformed sabotage into artistry right before their eyes. Phones that had been pointed to capture his humiliation now flickered with flashlight beams, swaying in time like at a real concert. Faces that moments ago had been ready to jeer now wore expressions of wonder and respect. Jason's triumphant smirk faded, replaced by a tightness around his eyes. The plan had backfired spectacularly. Ethan's voice, once tentative, now pulsed with newfound confidence, breaking down the barriers of mockery and prejudice with each note. The very thing meant to destroy him became the soundtrack of his resilience. As the last echoes of the song faded, the silence was swiftly replaced by an eruption of genuine applause, spontaneous and roaring, sweeping through the auditorium like a wave of recognition. In that electrified moment, Ethan wasn't just a scholarship kid or the daughter's son. He was a force that no interference could silence. Just as Ethan's voice began to soar, a sudden flicker of light sent a shiver through the auditorium. The pristine sound system betrayed him, crackling and spitting out a high-pitched feedback that pierced the air like shards of glass. Confusion rippled through the crowd as an unexpected, heavy electronic beat slammed through the speakers. Loud, jarring, and utterly intrusive. Behind the scenes, Jason Miller and his cronies had invaded the technical booth, their malicious grins illuminated by the glow of tangled wires and flashing panels. The sabotage was blatant, an attempt to turn Ethan's moment of triumph into a public disaster. But instead of faltering, Ethan paused, his brow furrowing not in panic but in sharp focus. Years of watching his mother improvise during rehearsals, twisting the unexpected into magic, surged through him. Without missing a beat, he adjusted his vocal style, weaving his soulful melody into the harsh electronic rhythm. The intrusive noise no longer clashed with his song. It became part of it, a bold fusion of raw emotion and modern pulse. The audience's bewilderment shifted to astonishment as Ethan transformed sabotage into artistry right before their eyes. Phones that had been pointed to capture his humiliation now flickered with flashlight beams, swaying in time like at a real concert. Faces that moments ago had been ready to jeer now wore expressions of wonder and respect. Jason's triumphant smirk faded, replaced by a tightness around his eyes. The plan had backfired spectacularly. Ethan's voice, once tentative, now pulsed with newfound confidence, breaking down the barriers of mockery and prejudice with each note. The very thing meant to destroy him became the soundtrack of his resilience. As the last echoes of the song faded, the silence was swiftly replaced by an eruption of genuine applause, spontaneous and roaring, sweeping through the auditorium like a wave of recognition. In that electrified moment, Ethan wasn't just a scholarship kid or the daughter's son. He was a force that no interference could silence. The thunderous applause rippled through the auditorium like a tidal wave, sweeping away the remnants of doubt and derision that had once clung to Ethan Carter. Students rose from their seats, their cheers no longer laced with mockery, but charged with genuine admiration. Even Connor Mitchell, the privileged heir who had been Jason Miller's closest ally, was the first to stand and join the standing ovation, his expression unreadable yet undeniably sincere. Meanwhile, Jason sat frozen, arms crossed, his face twisted into a bitter scowl that betrayed the storm raging inside. The air was thick with disbelief. The carefully constructed narrative of humiliation had been shattered, replaced by a raw, undeniable truth. Backstage, Mrs. Collins found Ethan trembling slightly, adrenaline coursing through his veins like wildfire. "You knew they'd try something like that," she said softly, her voice a steady anchor amidst the chaos. Ethan nodded, the weight of anticipation and fear lifting slightly now that the worst had passed. "Jason told me he had a surprise planned," Ethan admitted, a small, weary smile tugging at his lips. "That's why I chose that song. Something my mom wrote, so I could improvise and adapt. I knew I had to be ready." Mrs. Collins looked at him with a mixture of pride and awe, understanding the depth of his courage. "They always underestimate you," she said, her tone both admiring and resolute, "and that's their greatest mistake." Outside the dressing room, murmurs of praise began to swell as students gathered, eager to speak with Ethan, to hear more about the boy who had turned a trap into triumph. But lurking in the shadows, Jason's cold gaze burned with unspoken threats as he typed furiously on his phone, his voice a low whisper. "Enjoy this moment. I've made sure it will be brief." The chill in those words hinted at battles yet to come, a reminder that while one stage was won, the war for Ethan's place in this world was far from over.